Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of TBR. And I'm George Binns, and I'm continuing with our discussions of candidates for the City Councilor at Large. Keith Sonia
Yeah.
is tonight's guest. How you doing, Keith?
I'm doing well, George. Really grateful to have the opportunity to be with you today.
So, I guess you've been in Beverly how long?
I got to Beverly in 2019. We've had family here for much longer than that. I grew up in Lynn, so a neighbor.
Yeah.
But we've been back. I lived in London for a long time after being in Lynn, and then we got here, 2019.
Yeah. So what do you think of the city? What do you think? If you were a real estate agent
Yeah.
and you were trying to sell a house to some couple, how would you describe the city?
It's a wonderful and welcoming place. We're a great coastal community, of course, with a lot of great bones. There's not too many cities I know of the size of Beverly that have 4 live event theaters. We do have that in town. I'm heading to Off Cabot tonight for Mr. Tim Meadows. Looking forward to that. So there's something to do every night. There's a wonderful sense of community. There's something to do every night entertainment-wise, but also public meetings and civically minded organizations working on interesting projects. There's something to go to every day. So there are people who strive every day to make this a more welcoming and forward-thinking community. That's why I kind of got involved very early on in terms of when I got here. We kind of rolled up our sleeves immediately, and we've been welcomed into the fold. So if you are looking for a place that is constantly striving to get ahead, constantly striving to make things better, more affordable, a place where people are thinking about their neighbors and how to help them and how to help them get ahead, then Beverly's the place for you, and that's why I'm so proud to live here.
So on the other half of the game is, suppose you were talking with some company that was thinking of relocating here. How would you sell the city to a business?
Similarly, we do have great bones. We have, again, access to the coast. We have quick access to the city of Boston, to Cambridge, where there's a lot of interesting economic development happening. We have our own economic development happening here. We have 2 universities right here in Beverly. So you have a built-in workforce potentially. There's an opportunity to work with our public schools to help our students get ahead and plan for the jobs of tomorrow. We have a great small business community. I was just with the Greater Beverly Chamber the other day. They were very welcoming. I appreciated that and learning a lot about what their issues are. We have cool stuff like North Shore Innoventures right in the Cummings Center that are welcoming businesses from all over the world doing really, again, interesting, forward-thinking stuff in ag bio and fintech and all kinds of interesting markets where you can be part of that scene and where you can be tapped into what I think is a city on the move. And so we'd look forward to welcoming those who wish to invest in Beverly for sure.
Gee, sounds great.
Yeah, it's a lot happening.
So you get to the point of, okay, you're going to run for a councilor at large. What do you want to fix when you get there?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? It all sounds so rosy.
Yeah.
Right, I think the great thing about Beverly is we do have so much positive happening. There's no question about that. I think where we can improve is on some of the nuts and bolts. Obviously our roads and sidewalks. And I know a lot of folks have opined on that and that the city has tried to come up with ways to make that a more transparent process. I do think we can do a bit better. The one thing I bring up a lot, and I feel like some people think, that's kind of small potatoes, but to me it's really not. It's something like our city website. It could be a little bit more informative. It could be a little bit more forward thinking. So if you are a resident or if you are someone who's looking to invest in Beverly, as a small business, how can I do all of the things that I need to do to get my ducks in a row at this one-stop shop? How can that process be more efficient? That's a tool we can really tap into. My background is pretty eclectic. I've worked in Congress, I've worked at the State House, I've worked in local government, I've worked in public affairs on behalf of big clients like the T or MassDOT, City of Boston, and thinking about how can we better engage the community. That's really what I'd like to bring is, when you have issues like infrastructure, when we're coming out of a school strike and the feelings are still kind of raw and we're looking to build a bridge into the future, when we're talking about affordability and utility costs and all of these things, I don't have all the answers on all of the issues today, but what I can promise folks is that I'm going to enthusiastically advocate for them, and I'm going to enthusiastically propose that we hold more meetings and we think really long and hard about how we're engaging with the community. That's what I think I can bring to the table in the early days of a hypothetical city council term.
Yeah.
So I think we have a lot of talking to do with each other to fix those nuts and bolts.
Well, you bring up the teacher strike, and it's been kind of a contentious year between that and the cost of the sticker shock, really, of the library. It started out as a $3 million project to fix the AC, and it turned into $18 million.
Yeah.
There's been talk back and forth about we ought to renovate the city hall, and it's going from 18 million to 25 to 38. Now it's back to 25,
Right.
last I heard.
Right.
So that's another moving target. And we've got this $7.3 million parking lot we just bought downtown. So there's a lot of expenses going on. And where's you going to get the money from to pay it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of challenges out there for sure. And I think one of the things that could help in situations like those is, again, better public engagement. I think as we're prioritizing the needs of the community, what do we need to do today? What do we need to do in 5 years, et cetera, and everything in between? Having those conversations more out in the open and more publicly, I think will help, determine what steps we ought to be taking. I think otherwise you kind of get a little tunnel vision. You make it more difficult for yourself to kind of prioritize needs. So if you have those conversations out in the open, you, George, and our neighbors across town, when you hear numbers like that about a given project, you're not going, whoa, 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 where'd that come from? It's sort of like you've been a part of that process. There's less surprises. I think someone mentioned to me about Mayor Scanlon that he kind of his kind of platform was no surprises, and I think there's something to that of just like, let's talk about things, let's engage, and let's bring these projects to the fore because we want folks to be tapped in and not have a big $10 million, $30 million bill that they were kind of unaware of come in from left field. I think there's a lot of people working very hard at City Hall to improve our city every day, from the mayor on down. But I think there's just room to involve the community just a little bit more.
Well, that gets back to the issue of, okay, the teacher strike is over. There are settlement costs.
Sure.
Again, that's another big number of $800,000. And the one that surprised me is $140,000 for publicity. Don't know where that came from, but that's another long story. But also, there comes words drifting out that maybe we need an override to finance more things at the school system. And again, you bring up the point of, well, what are we going to get for this override? And have you heard anything?
I've not heard about there definitely being an override or anything like that. I've heard of an override in the ether. It's out there. But, I think we can potentially avoid that. I think there are opportunities where we can invest in our schools, we can make Beverly more welcoming to small business, and we can fix our infrastructure. I think these things all support each other, right? Like if you have great schools, that attracts a talented workforce. A talented workforce means a small business, a medium-sized business, a large business is going to be more interested in investing in Beverly to tap into that workforce. More business, more tax revenue from the businesses, greater roads, better sidewalks, better infrastructure here
Yeah.
in Beverly. So I think these things all support each other, and it's just how can we balance those needs. I understand hard choices need to be made sometimes, but I think if we put our heads together, work as a team, we can avoid putting the burden on the taxpayer here in Beverly, and instead get creative, find those creative solutions, make Beverly a more inviting place for business, for families, and that should hopefully help us avoid something like that.
Well, you also mentioned early on in your discussion about I need to make the city more affordable.
Mm.
My particular hick on it is everybody that works in Beverly ought to be able to afford to live here.
Sure.
And at the same time, you look at the teachers' salaries,
Yeah.
and they're hard pressed to rent an apartment.
Right. Absolutely.
And I've had one teacher on, ex-teacher, and she mentioned that when she got her teacher's license, she had to get a roommate before the two of them could afford an apartment.
Sure.
And yeah, we've had an awful lot of development on Rantoul Street in particular. But again, that's not the kind of apartment or dwelling that the average person can, at least the average worker in Beverly can afford. So I get a concern that we're turning the city into something that's almost like visiting Disneyland.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
if you can afford to live here, you have to work someplace else.
Yeah, right.
Kind of thing.
You're being invited to have two jobs or something. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's challenging for sure. I think there are interesting solutions. I've had a lot of productive conversations with folks who are thinking about this all day, whether that's developers or folks on our planning board here. One idea I'll give credit where it's due to Mr. Derek Beckwith. I had a great meeting with him, and he talked about community preservation funds, where most of the time those funds are directed toward renovating our parks and our historic sites and things of that nature, as they should be.
Mm-hmm.
But there are opportunities, particularly with like the new ADU ordinance here in town, for folks to kind of request some of those funds if they're willing to, deed whatever they're renovating as affordable in perpetuity. So it's like, we can help you, get this accessory unit up to snuff. You can, sell or rent or whatever, but that's going to be a deeded, affordable place to live. Now, that's kind of like one-offs, I understand. It doesn't necessarily solve the entire problem, but it helps make it so that our teachers, our first responders, the folks who contribute to our community so thoroughly, but who also want to live in this community and be a part of this community, it helps kind of, move that ball forward so that we can, continue to house those folks here in town. I'm a renter. I just got married last year, so we're still basking in newlywed zone, and we're thinking about, starting a family. And, I'm literally going to be on the ballot here, and I'm thinking about, well, how can we make sure that we're in this community for the very long term? That's what we want. And so, I'm living that question every day. I think I'm the only under 40 candidate so far in this race, and so I think, as a young professional, my wife a young professional, we're kind of thinking the same thoughts that these folks are, and so they can trust that I'll be standing shoulder to shoulder with them to try and find those solutions.
Well, you mentioned some of the different classes of workers that have this challenge, and one of the things you mentioned early on is we've got a very vibrant downtown community.
Yeah.
And that service industry is one of the ones that it's not the greatest paying job in the world.
It's tough.
And yet we need those kind of people to be able to get here and
Absolutely.
help us out.
Absolutely, for sure. We're downtown dwellers. We live downtown. It's awesome. We love living downtown, being able to walk to so much, being able to take in, again, a show, what have you. But you're right. Folks are earning $15, $18, $20 an hour, which not that long ago sounds pretty sweet, but is now, kind of a tight number. That's challenging. It's challenging for the small business owner, the mom and pop size business owner who, to be fair to them, have rising utility costs and different needs. I'm sure they'd love to be able to pay their folks a better wage. And so we have to think about how to, make it so that those small business owners can offer, because there's nothing they'd love to be able to do more than retain employees. I mean, I've had this conversation with folks where, one of their chief challenges is retaining good staff.
Oh, the turnover, yeah.
Is crazy, right?
Yeah.
And, you get it. Some of those roles are filled by, our university students or whatever.
Yeah.
They're going to come and they're going to go for sure. But there are really talented people. One of the best bartenders I think we've seen is over at Ellis Square. I mean, this is like someone who's a real professional and knows what they're doing. We've got to make sure that person can afford to be in Beverly for the long term as well, because they do contribute to the vibrancy of the downtown for sure.
Well, we get into some of these issues a lot that you and I are exposed to. But the other question I have is you're walking around the neighborhoods gathering signatures. You got them all yet?
We're stat padding now, George. We've got well over 100, but you want to just make sure they're all legal beagle and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
So we've done well to kind of get all those in order.
So what are you hearing from the people as you go around and knock on the door?
Yeah, it is kind of that nuts and bolts stuff I mentioned before. I think everyone kind of recognizes that we live in a great community, that we have great neighbors. There's the beach. Close to Boston, can hop the train. We're one of, I think it's us and I guess maybe Needham or one of those towns down the South Shore that have as many stops as we do on the commuter rail. It's a real benefit, obviously. Again, there's a lot happening in Beverly, but it's sort of like, well, this pothole's been here for a long time. My utility rates are high. I live on Broadway.
Yeah.
And we've had a National Grid footprint on Broadway for something like 3 years, which is cuckoo land to me, I think. So I used to work for a public affairs firm where one of our clients was Eversource. And so I had a vague notion of like how long it should take to bury a transmission line and how long they should be in any given spot. And 3 years was never what we would pitch to the community, I can tell you that. And I understand they've hit a lot of challenges. I recognize the leadership of some of our city councilors, et cetera, on holding grid accountable, but it's just getting those nuts and bolts things correct that I think folks are eager to do. And certainly our schools, I think there are folks who want to make sure that our schools, our teachers, are given what they deserve, that they know that their young person is getting a quality education, that they're in a safe building, and that they can excel later in life as a result of the education they get here in Beverly. And then just generally, what you mentioned before, the affordability issue. How can we afford to stay in Beverly if I'm a young professional or if I'm a senior? My property taxes are going up. I'm a senior. I've been in this house for 30, 40, 50 years. I would like to stay in this house, but it's becoming more and more challenging. What are the solutions we can find to make sure that our parents, our grandparents can continue to be in Beverly as well? That's kind of what I'm hearing on the doors.
Well, that's part of the ADU idea.
Yep.
That you build something on your property that's comfortable,
Right.
1 or 2 bedroom, small house, and you move into that, and then you rent the big house.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, that is one of the brighter things I've seen done. And at the other extreme, we get into the challenge with the bridges that are out forever.
Yeah,
And
it seems like the timelines make you think it could be forever.
yeah, and so we get into a situation where neighborhoods that used to think they could get here from there can't anymore, or you have to do different things.
That's right.
Or the traffic patterns become not friendly.
That's right. So I run the gauntlet on Elliott Street, coming to and from. So I live downtown, and so I understand those traffic jams. I really sympathize, as kind of an immediate neighbor to our neighbors in Ryleside, just how difficult that's been for residents for the small businesses that are still there, where now, a huge flow of traffic that used to pass by their business is now diverted elsewhere. I think it's one of those deals where, from what I understand, the city was briefed that it was actually more the Kernwood Bridge that was in tougher shape. And then suddenly there was a day where the state was like, oh, by the way, you have to close that bridge tomorrow. And so unless, to be fair to the mayor and to be fair to the folks in charge here in Beverly, unless they were in scuba equipment under there, taking a look at the quality of that bridge, it was tough to predict. Now, we can continue to hold the state's feet to the fire, continue to outline why getting that bridge back online is so vital to such a critical neighborhood for the city. Ryle side is so cool, right? It's just sort of like, a real close-knit neighborhood. And, that's the kind of place I grew up, is where everybody knows each other, where they're all kind of fighting on behalf of one another. And so we ought to be fighting on their behalf as well. And I know Councilor Rotundo is a great advocate for those folks. And I'd look forward to kind of being a part of that as well, to make sure that their issues are heard. Particularly as we think, too, George, about future development. There are parts of the city where I think, we could introduce new development to help. But anything that we do needs to be balanced with, again, what I mentioned earlier, robust public engagement, making sure that folks who are kind of going through, the motions of the bridge being out and what have you, and having to kind of change their patterns, like you said, making sure that they feel heard in any future process. I think that's an imperative.
Yeah, the other one is, I guess, the Bass River overlay. That now you see it, now you don't. It's been going on for 10 plus years.
And now the bowling alley's for lease, and as a Candlepin fan, I'd love to see it, but I'm thinking that's probably not going to happen. So that's challenging.
And I think that's one of the problems that the city gets into, that we talk about, well, we're going to do this in the future, and it hardly ever comes. And we've been talking about Folly Hill for 5 years, and now they're talking about it, and they still have a problem. What are we going to do about the traffic?
Yeah.
And the issue is, you can get to 128 from Folly Hill, but you can only go to Gloucester.
Right.
Or you have to be coming out of Lynn to get on it.
Yeah.
And the same with the issue of how do we get to Dunham Road? And you can go through the traffic circle and up Dunham Road, but that's kind of an inconvenience for the families that live there with all this heavy traffic.
Right.
And the music theater doesn't help much either.
Right.
So we've got these facilities that we ought to be doing something about.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity that exists, George, I think. And it's just, how do we move forward? Obviously, something like the bridge going out makes the Bass River overlay, for example, a more challenging prospect in the very near term. It's sort of like, well, are we going to be able to develop a plan as soon as traffic is able to go over the bridge, or can we not develop a plan until the final permanent new kind of structure is put in place? So those are differences of like half a decade in terms of timeline. That's a big stretch of time where, there are going to be a lot of interested folks in a strip of land where right now there's not too much activity, where there could be. And that's going to help bring in tax revenue and things like that. So we can invest in the things that we want to invest in as a community. But, in order to get there, we have to have, the bridge get fixed. And then we have to have, like I say, a real strong conversation with a community like Ryleside, with the downtown community, where, again, as you pointed out, our day-to-day is sort of been altered pretty dramatically as a result of the bridge going out. So it's sort of like, hey, we fixed the bridge, and guess what? There's going to be all this construction here the next day. I can understand if that breeds a bit of fatigue, a bit of frustration, etc. But, we have to be proactive in the conversations we have. Whatever plan is kind of ultimately developed for that area, I'd love to be involved in that process. And I'd love to bring it to the community and make sure that they feel they have a seat at the table. And it goes for projects throughout the city. Making sure folks feel heard, I think, is the most important thing.
Talking about proactive, and one of the things I would think about is, why don't we develop the Bass River plan right now so that it's ready to go when the bridge is, rather than, okay, we'll start thinking about it for another umpteen years.
I think that's a challenge for the developers, frankly. Based on my
Well, it's a
understanding.
challenge for the city to make things happen and decide on what we want to do. But, so you can tell the audience
Oh, well.
how you're going to do that.
All right. George, I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you. And I want to thank the people of Beverly for considering me as one of your 3 votes for Councilor at Large. As I've outlined to George here, I think there's a real opportunity for us to come together on affordability, on infrastructure, on schools, on climate resilience, on keeping our seniors in their homes, on giving an opportunity to young professionals like myself as the only under 40 candidate in this race. By bringing folks together, by building those bridges into the future, by taking a good look at what our issues are, as outlined here with George, and finding common solutions together as neighbors. One thing I can bring to this race for sure is a commitment to strong public engagement, to transparency, whether that's easy to use, easy to navigate website, something as simple as that, or when we are thinking about big picture development, making sure that you and I and my colleagues on the council and your neighbors can come together, can come up with a plan that makes sense for you, your community, your neighborhood, and your immediate neighbors. So I would look forward to being someone that you can count on to be in your corner in perpetuity. As new projects come into town, you can count on me to be someone who's advocating for your needs and for the city of Beverly. I'm so grateful to be here. This is such a wonderful community. My wife and I are fully bought in to Beverly, and it would be an absolute privilege to represent you on the council, and it would be an absolute honor to receive your vote in November. I look forward to the conversations ahead, and I want to thank George again for the opportunity to be here. Thanks so much, folks.
Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And ladies and gentlemen, as usual, my email address is at the front and the back of the presentation. So if you have a comment, send me a note, or if you have a longer comment, there's room for you here at the table. Thanks again for joining us, and stay tuned. There'll be more.